Hello there. Tonight we are going to slip past a curtain that was never meant for strangers. The marble floor is cool beneath your feet, the air thick with the scent of rosewater and ancient secrets. You're standing at the edge of the royal women's quarters of Persepolis, the hidden heart of a mighty empire. Somewhere behind you the sun has dipped below the columns and carved sphinxes of the palace casting golden light across the stones. But ahead of you, past layers of embroidered drapery and gilded lamps, lies a world behind a world, a place built not of armies and decrees, but of silk whispers and strategy, more delicate than any sword play. You probably won't survive a day in here, not because you'll be thrown out not immediately anyway, but because the rules aren't written. One wrong glance, one badly timed smile, and suddenly you're nobody. Even in a palace of queens, survival is never guaranteed. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Are you wrapped up in blankets in Ohio at 2:00 a.m. or are you watching this as Tokyo starts to stir? Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You step forward and the curtain brushes against your arm, soft as breath. The moment you cross the threshold, the world muffles itself. The echo of sandals against marble fades into silence, and suddenly you're inside a hushed, perfumed realm that feels more dream than history. Tall arches bloom above you like stone petals painted in fading pigments, turquoise deep, indigo, saffron gold. The columns are etched with images of winged animals and curling lotus flowers. You're not walking through a corridor. You're walking into a story that was never meant to be told. The floors gleam beneath you, polished so perfectly, they reflect the flickering light of the oil lamps. The warmth is sticky, not from fire, but from breath and skin and time. A breeze carries the scent of frankincense and warm fig. Somewhere someone is playing a soft melody on a sitar, its notes barely louder than the rustle of silk. You begin to realize everything here is both beautiful and dangerous. A woman glides past you, not walking but flowing. Her robe is dyed a violet so dark it's nearly black, stitched at the hems with tiny gold crescents. She carries a mirror bronze round and catching the flame just so. You might think she's checking her reflection, but her eyes are darting across the room, and then blink, she angles the mirror just slightly. A flash of light bounces off the polished floor, winks across the walls. A message maybe, a warning, or just a silent hello to someone watching. Historians still debate whether elite Persian women used mirrors for secret communication, or if that's just something romantic Greek travelers made up after too much wine. But as you watch her disappear into the shadows, you're pretty sure it wasn't vanity. This is the women's quarters, yes. But it's no sleepy sanctuary. It's a hive, buzzing with intention, full of minds as sharp as the knives in the royal kitchens. The young woman on the rug beside you isn't simply brushing her hair. She's listening to the older woman beside her who hasn't stopped smiling since you entered, but her fingers keep tapping a rhythmic code on the carved cedar armrest. Every movement here has a second meaning, maybe even a third. You pass a table set low to the ground where 4 women sit in a semicircle, laughing softly as they shell pistachios. They look relaxed. But then one of them suddenly leans in, voice dropping so low it's almost inaudible. Another glance over her shoulder, the laughter fades. The bowl is still between them, but the mood has shifted entirely. You realize that in this palace, trust is rationed like saffron rare precious and not to be wasted. You step deeper into the maze and notice the walls now shimmer with patterns you didn't see before. Embroidered tapestries hang on every surface, woven in the style of Susa or maybe Ekbatana. Lions and gazelles chase each other endlessly around the edges, caught forever in the dance of predator and prey. In the center of one hangs a majestic figure, a queen, maybe a tosser herself, riding a chariot drawn by lions. Her expression is serene, but her hands grip the reins tightly. This is not a woman who lets the wind decide where she's going. Another tapestry nearby shows a different kind of hunt, a group of women veiled and hooded guiding a caravan through the mountains. It's a curious image, and you wonder, was this allegory or memory? Did women in the court ever lead missions of state, or is this wishful thinking sewn in silk? Historians still argue about the level of political involvement these royal women held. But looking around at the way women pause mid-step to assess each other, how servants bow just a little deeper here than anywhere else, you start to suspect that the truth was buried behind perfumed curtains and not written down. You pause by an arched alcove where a woman is reciting poetry. She's seated beside a carved fountain that trickles gently into a shallow marble bowl. The words are in Old Persian, the language thick and musical, but the tone is unmistakable, powerful, mournful, sharp as vinegar. You recognize a phrase the moon hides from envy when her eyes open. You don't know who she's talking about, but from the crowd of silent women around her, you guess it's not flattery. A small monkey darts across the rug and disappears behind a cushion. No one flinches, not even the woman pouring rosewater into silver goblets. Apparently pet monkeys dressed in fine cloth were all the rage once. One supposedly bowed so convincingly to a nobleman that the king gave it a sash. If that's not court politics in a nutshell, what is? Suddenly a servant appears with a tray of pomegranate wine. She offers you a cup. You take it cautiously. It's sweet, but not too sweet. Tart enough to wake your tongue. You notice she lingers for a moment long enough to hear your response. You nod politely and she disappears. What did she learn about you from that moment that you're new, that you don't belong? Probably. You round another corner and now the air is denser, heavier. The scent of sandalwood sharpens. You pass under a low beam and enter a room with fewer women, but they speak with more authority. One of them is leaning against a carved column, speaking to a younger woman who holds a clay tablet like it's made of glass. She's nodding, learning, absorbing. This is a classroom, but one where the curriculum is ambition. No one screams here. They don't need to. A whisper here can end a marriage. A glance can spark a rumor. A poorly chosen dress color might be interpreted as disrespectful. You think that's an exaggeration. Once a satrap's daughter wore a red sash to a feast of mourning. The next morning her father's property was under review and the sash had disappeared. And you're just a visitor, floating silently through a maze of whispers and golden hemstitches, watching the women who shaped history without ever appearing in it. You look down at your feet, the marble cool and firm. Your own reflection stares back at you, and for a moment you wonder, is anyone looking at you through the curtains right now, reading your posture, weighing your silence? You breathe in, and the scent of rosewater clings to your throat. Somewhere nearby, a tapestry shifts in the breeze. A laugh, then silence. You move forward because there's no turning back, and this is only the first room. You slip away from the curtained labyrinth of the women's quarters and follow the hush of footsteps down a narrower corridor. The marble, colder here, the shadows longer. The air smells of sandalwood and something else, older, like ambition. You pass beneath an arch carved with griffins and vines, and suddenly you're somewhere different. Still within the palace, yes, but this wing doesn't buzz with gossip or the soft laughter of court ladies. It thrums with tension, slow and coiled like a cat beneath a silk sheet. This is the shadow of the queen. You step into a vast room lit by the honeyed glow of oil lamps, their flames mirrored in the polished floor. Tiled walls gleam with deep lapis and dusty rose, each tile painted with careful symbols, lotus blossoms, winged sphinxes, the ever-watchful eye of Ahura Mazda. You're no longer in the domain of hopeful daughters or ambitious concubines. Here, the decisions ripple outward across provinces, across satrapies, across borders. This is where queens don't merely survive. They shaped the empire. And there she is. You don't know her name. Maybe it's a mistress wife of Xerxes I, whose reputation flickers between devoted queen and terrifying puppet master. Or maybe it's someone quieter, someone who's never been written about, but who once brokered the marriage that united two warring houses and stopped a revolt before it began. Whoever she is, she's seated on a low-cushioned platform, her robe the color of midnight, embroidered with gold thread so fine it glints like water. At her feet lies a leopard head resting lazily on crossed paw's tail, twitching with just enough menace to make your heart thump. Yes, a leopard. Historians still debate whether Persian queens truly kept them as pets, or if this was a Greek exaggeration, just one more attempt to paint the East as extravagant and strange. But the image was persistent, a woman with coal-lined eyes and velvet slippers issuing edicts with one hand while scratching a predator's ear with the other. You watch the animal breathe slow and shallow, and you're suddenly aware of every sound your feet make. The queen doesn't look up. She doesn't need to. Her gaze is fixed on a scribe who's just handed her a clay tablet. She reads slowly, lips moving just enough to suggest she's mouthing every name, every number, every threat. Grain yields from Bactria, silver stores from Sardis, the fertility rate of goats in a troubled village outside Ekbatana. It's not glamorous, but it's power. Real domestic granular power. The kind that determines whether soldiers are fed, whether temples are repaired, whether revolts start or end. Another woman steps forward, younger, dressed in a robe dyed with indigo and bearing the slight stiffness of nervous anticipation. She bows low, placing her hands together in a gesture of deference. The queen finally looks up. Her expression is unreadable, neither warm nor cruel, just practiced. You realize that everything here is performance. The queen's stillness, the leopard's yawn, even the placement of the tapestries depicting royal processions, sacred fires, and celestial symbols, all of it tells a story. One where she's always at the center, never passive, never vulnerable. Except, of course, she is. Because behind the gold thread and measured voice is someone playing a constant game. Imagine juggling flaming torches while reciting taxes in 3 languages, surrounded by men who'd smile while cutting your power off at the knees. That's court life. That's queenship. You pause by a massive window, its shutters thrown wide to reveal the city sprawling below. Pippolis under twilight looks like a basket of embers rooftops, glowing orange smoke rising in thin lines, the sounds of distant voices and cartwheels echoing up to the palace. From here it's easy to imagine yourself above it all. But the queen, she doesn't imagine. She directs. Behind you a faint murmur starts. A woman is reciting names, each one carefully enunciated sons of allies, brothers of enemies, the cousins of would-be rebels. You realize this is not a poetry reading. It's a ledger of threats. And the queen listens, unmoving, her hand resting on the leopard's back like it's a paperweight. You get the sense that one flick of her wrist and someone somewhere disappears. You inch along the wall and pass a statue, Ahura Mazda, the Zoroastrian god of wisdom and light wings outstretched perched atop a sacred disk. His watchful eyes seem to follow you. Religion wasn't just decoration here. For queens, it was expectation. They were expected to embody divine favor, to represent harmony, purity, cosmic order. No pressure right. Just be the moral compass of the world while dodging assassination via perfume bottle. And here's a quirky detail you weren't expecting. Some Persian queens were rumored to wear perfume that included crushed myrtle and pine resin mixed with gold dust. Not just to smell nice, but to reflect divine light during religious ceremonies. Whether it worked or not, no one dared sneeze. You approach a smaller alcove where a servant is tending to a small firebowl, sprinkling sandalwood chips into the coals. The scent blooms in your lungs, grounding oddly calming. You imagine the queen preparing herself before a court audience, perfumed, poised, pre-planned, down to the curve of her eyebrows. She couldn't afford spontaneity. Not here, not ever. A hush falls again as another tablet is brought forward. The queen takes it, examines the seal, then sets it aside. A decision made with no words, no dramatic decorations, just a gentle thump of clay against table. And yet, the room shifts. Someone's fate just changed. Somewhere in the empire, a marriage will not take place. A province may go unsupervised. A rival may have just been given enough rope to tie a noose or build a bridge. You'll never know. That's the point. You try to imagine yourself in her place, seated on that cushion, trying to read tax reports, while a predator naps beside you and 3 provinces depend on your reaction to a phrase. You'd probably spill the ink, get ink on the leopard, get mauled, and trigger a minor revolt in the east. So you take a polite step back. You're safer here, in the shadows. Still, you can't help but feel the weight of this room. It's not just history, it's gravity. The slow, deliberate pull of power that doesn't need to shout or shimmer. It simply exists. Solid, seductive, terrifying. The queen lifts her gaze. For one heartbeat, her eyes meet yours. You freeze. She doesn't smile, doesn't frown. She simply sees you. And then she looks away. You exhale and keep walking. The corridor narrows again as you leave the queen's court behind. Gone are the high ceilings and gold leaf columns. Here, the air is cooler shadows, thicker. A servant passes carrying a copper tray stacked with folded linens, her eyes low, her feet silent. You follow her path and slip into a passage that feels quieter, still more secretive, though it's no less elaborate. The stone is darker, the lighting softer, more diffused, and now the scent has changed. Jasmine mingled with smoke from perfume coals, and beneath it all, something deeper, something like tension. This is the harem, not the fantasy version sold in Western paintings, no lounging odalisks and golden chains here, but a system, a structure, a world within a world that very few men and even fewer outsiders ever fully understood. You're stepping into an ecosystem of hierarchy, ritual, subtle power, and sometimes outright desperation. Welcome to the other half of the palace. A heavy wooden door swings open without a creak. The moment you step inside, voices fall. Not from fear, not exactly just instinct. Women glance your way, measuring not startled, just curious. Suspicious. Their expressions are practiced brows, unraised smiles, unreadable posture, somewhere between rest and readiness. You pass them like a breeze, not unwelcome, but not invited either. The room opens into a series of courtyards. Some women are seated in the shade of date palms, embroidering with thread so fine it vanishes in the light. Others recline on cushions, sipping something from porcelain bowls. But don't let the tranquility fool you. Every one of them is calculating. The harem is not leisure. It's politics in a robe. A girl walks past you barefoot, no older than 15. Her hair is braided with lapis lazuli beads, her tunic embroidered with cranes. She looks delicate, but her eyes flick around the courtyard like a soldier scanning a battlefield. She's practicing a smile, the kind she'll use later when summoned before the king. That smile has been rehearsed more times than you've tied your shoes. Because in this world, the right smile could mean a child, and a child could mean land wealth or survival. The wrong one, silence. Or worse, invisibility. Concubines, wives, and daughters of allied nobles all lived here, sometimes by choice, often not. Some were brought to Persepolis as diplomatic gifts. Others came after their fathers lost battles. Their duties varied, bearing children, ensuring loyalty, maintaining appearances, but their stakes were always the same, don't be forgotten. You pause near a low cedar bench where a woman lounges, her fingers tracing the design on a golden armlet. She might be a secondary wife married to the king as part of an alliance with Bactria or Lydia. Her role, bear heirs. Remain obedient, avoid scandal. But the flick of her wrist says she's thinking several moves ahead. Maybe not for herself, but for her son. If she's clever and he grows strong, she could rise through him. If she's foolish, she'll be remembered only as the woman who wore gold and did nothing with it. Nearby, two women speak softly over a platter of candied dates. Their conversation looks casual, but their eyes never stop scanning. They're watching a servant who just spilled a copper cup. The clatter echoes through the courtyard. Everyone stiffens. But the older of the two waves it off with a practiced smile, gracious but firm. She's not just being kind, she's showing power by withholding punishment. Discipline here is as subtle as perfume applied lightly but unmistakable. The cushions around you are embroidered with pomegranates and lions. The walls shimmer with inlaid shells that catch the light like stars. It's beautiful, but don't mistake this for freedom. Most of these women rarely leave. Their world is confined to these rooms, these courtyards, and the spaces between. It's a luxurious cage, but still a cage. You pass a row of hanging braziers, their heat releasing the fragrance of rose oil and burning cedar. You pause to admire a painted screen depicting a lush garden. It looks inviting, green vines, flowing waterbirds mid-flight, but it's not real. It's a painting for those who can't go outside. Some concubines were said to keep tiny clay figurines carved to resemble their rivals. Not for worship, but for petty curses. A twist of the neck, a whisper of malice, and then into the fire. Historians still debate whether this was truly common, or just juicy gossip from nosy Greek visitors. But you can't help imagining a concubine muttering darkly over a lumpy figurine while sipping fig wine. You'd probably break yours in half and then panic over whether you just doomed yourself. You turn a corner and enter a room with a loom tucked into the far alcove. A woman mid-30s, maybe older, sits at it weaving slowly, steadily, as if the rhythm is all that holds her together. Her fingers are worn, but her work is delicate. She's not just killing time. She's creating something that might hang in the palace or be gifted to a satrap's wife. Her skill is currency. And sometimes it's rebellion. Some harem women made textiles so prized they were allowed to sell them quietly, discreetly, with profits hidden beneath their floor mats or woven into false bottom boxes. Whether they had full control of those profits, though, historians can't agree. Some say it was a rare privilege. Others argue it was all supervised, taxed, and traced. Watching her now, you get the sense that even if she isn't free, she's not powerless. Behind a lattice screen, you hear giggles. Younger concubines whispering, maybe exchanging stories, maybe mocking someone's new earrings. They sound like girls anywhere until you remember that each one is competing for the same limited attention. Each one knows that youth fades, and attention with it. You pause by a fountain, its water trickling lazily. The sound should be relaxing. But instead, it underscores the tension. A reminder that everything in this world is controlled: how you walk, how you eat, how you speak, even how you laugh. And yet these women laugh anyway. They form friendships, share secrets, trade beauty tips, plot futures. That more than anything is what strikes you. The harem isn't just a place of rivalry, it's also a place of alliance. You picture yourself here. You probably trip over a cushion, spill a bowl of dates, and insult a satrap's cousin before breakfast. And even that would be survivable if you smiled the right way afterward. But who knows? Maybe you'd find your rhythm, learn to weave, learn to whisper. Maybe you'd even learn to win. But as you step out of the courtyard's hush, back into the wider pulse of the palace, you realize something else. Every woman in that space is playing a long game. Not for romance, not for escape, but for influence. They don't dream of thrones, they build them, quietly, thread by thread. You step out of the harem's layered silence and into a different rhythm altogether. The breeze sharpens, the light shifts. A bird cries in the distance, somewhere outside the palace walls. You follow the sound of fabric fluttering and sandals scuffing against stone until you find her. a noblewoman poised like a sculpture in motion halfway through a courtyard framed by flowering pomegranate trees. Her name, let's call her Anahita. She doesn't notice you at first, or maybe she does but pretends not to. That too is a kind of power. Her robe is cream-colored, trimmed with deep blue thread, not flashy but unmistakably expensive. You catch the glint of a tiny seal at her belt, a bronze cylinder engraved with her personal insignia. She's headed somewhere with purpose, and because this is ancient Persia, that purpose likely includes grain tallies, tax reports, and a banquet that must simultaneously impress 5 minor nobles and insult a rival's cousin just enough to stir tension, but not so much as to cause a duel. You fall into step behind her. Not too close, never too close. The courtyard smells like crushed mint and early sunlight. Servants clear a path with their eyes ducking into alcoves and doorways. Anahita doesn't look left or right. She doesn't have to. Her day began at dawn hours before yours. While you were still struggling to roll out of your blanket, she was already reviewing stockpiles of barley and wool, receiving updates from estate managers, and checking that a shipment of dried figs hadn't spoiled during transport. She doesn't do this for fun. She does it because her name, her family's name, relies on it. In the Achaemenid Empire, noblewomen like Anahita weren't just decorative fixtures at feasts. They were managers of estates, arbiters of household justice, and economic engines in their own right. Some scholars argue that these women had nearly equal control over domestic finances as their husbands did, especially when said husbands were off fighting battles, making trade journeys, or let's be honest, drinking too much at the king's hunting lodge. Anahita reaches a small loggia overlooking the inner courtyard. 2 scribes are waiting, both seated cross-legged beside a stack of clay tablets. They bow. She doesn't waste time. Her voice is low but sharp, like a blade that doesn't need to be unsheathed to be understood. She asks about a recent shipment of wool. One scribe hesitates too long. Her gaze flicks toward him. He begins to sweat. You try to imagine running a household like hers. It's not just laundry and lunch, it's logistics, diplomacy, and occasionally emergency goat-based crisis management. A single delay in supplies could reflect poorly on her reputation. And reputation in this world is the currency that buys you access, alliances, and a whisper in the king's ear when it matters. One of the scribes hands her a small clay tablet. She presses her bronze seal into the soft square without blinking. This tablet may be a contract for seasonal labor, or an acknowledgement of land lease is now legally binding. It's a reminder that her power is real, inked into law with every signature. You wonder if she has ever lost one of those tiny seals. The idea terrifies you more than misplacing your phone. Imagine dropping it into a water jar and then having to explain to a tax official that yes, your fields are yours. But no, you can't prove it because your seal is floating next to a lemon peel. Some Persian noblewomen tied little bells to their sandals. It wasn't for fashion exactly. It was so people could hear them coming and adjust accordingly. Whether to stand straighter, hide their gossip, or scramble to prepare tea, those bells announced presence. Historians still debate whether this practice was common or just an eccentric trend from one noble family's winter festival. But you imagine Anahita choosing not to wear bells at all. Silence, after all, is its own kind of entrance. She turns and walks briskly towards the inner kitchens. A servant joins her, murmuring something about tonight's feast. Anahita listens with half her attention while adjusting her bracelets, 7 thin bangles, each inscribed with a proverb. You catch a glimpse of one. Patience eats faster than pride. A lesson, perhaps. Or a warning. The feast she's preparing for isn't just a meal. It's a performance. A carefully orchestrated social event that could tip the balance of favor between neighboring provinces. The seating chart alone could trigger a marriage proposal or a vendetta. You watch her enter a storeroom, inspect a bale of wool, sniff a jar of honeyed almonds, and nod once. She doesn't need to say much. Her presence does the work. You trail her back out into the courtyard, now humming with energy as servants trim hedges and sweep tiles. She stops beside a low table where clay jugs of wine are lined up for inspection. She lifts one, shakes it, gently listens. A subtle frown. Too light. She instructs the steward to replace it. Not angry, just efficient. You realize she doesn't yell, doesn't need to. Her authority is wrapped in stillness. As the sun climbs higher, she walks toward a private garden, just a moment, just a breath of calm. She kneels briefly beside a fire altar, murmuring a prayer to Anahita, the goddess of waters and fertility, for whom she may have been named. The flame flickers. Not dramatic, not ceremonial, just grounding. And then she rises. The prayer's done. The banquet looms. A cousin is coming who drinks too much. A satrap's niece might ask the wrong question, but she'll manage it all. With pomegranate wine, careful seating, and a strategically timed compliment about someone's jewelry. That's the game, and she plays it well. You try to imagine yourself in her place. You'd probably drop the contract, mispronounce the satrap's name, and spill honey on the only cushion not meant for sitting. But Anahita, she'll glide through it, correcting with a smile, commanding with a raised eyebrow, weaving influence like a silk thread through a loom you can't even see. The scribes gather their tablets and bow again. She doesn't look back as she disappears through a carved doorway framed by stone vines. Her day is far from over, and yours, you're already exhausted just watching her. You follow her without meaning to. Anahita moves like a current, and you, like a leaf caught in it, can't help but drift after her. The hallway she enters next is quieter than any you've seen. Narrower, padded with carpets so thick your steps vanish entirely. The doors here are lacquered wood trimmed with bronze, and the scent in the air has changed. Once again, now it's all rosewater and spice cedar, with just a faint edge of iron, like something unspoken is hidden beneath the surface. She slips behind one of the doors, and for a breath you hesitate. Then you step inside. This is no mere dressing room. This is command central disguised as luxury. A private chamber carved from silence and ritual, where every detail from the silk hanging on the wall to the curve of the mirror frame exists to serve a purpose. And in this room, purpose looks a lot like power. 3 servants await her. They move with the precision of temple acolytes, already knowing the choreography by heart. One opens a cedar chest, another retrieves a series of folded robes, the third begins laying out jewelry on a table draped in indigo cloth. You try to take it all in, but it's too much. The colors alone could blind a painter. Saffron, emerald, lapis, crimson, stitched with real gold thread. Not an ounce of this is for decoration. This is strategy in thread and stone. Anahita doesn't rush. She walks to a bronze mirror that's taller than she is, framed in carved fig leaves, and simply stands there. She studies herself not with vanity, but with clinical focus. A general reviewing battle plans, a performer walking through her blocking. She's dressed plainly for now, linen robe, hair pulled back, no jewelry, but that won't last. You sense the moment she switches modes. Her shoulders draw back. Her breath steadies. And then the transformation begins. The first robe is brought forward. It's a muted grey silk with black borders, elegant, tasteful, but not bold enough. She shakes her head once. Too soft. Another follows, the color of honey embroidered with flowers and pomegranates. She fingers the edge for a second, then dismisses it with a glance. Too festive. The third, deep blue with a wide collar and a subtle lion motif embroidered in gold thread, gets a longer look. She doesn't speak, but a servant steps forward and begins preparing it for wear. As the robe is unfurled and lifted, you see the texture shift in the light. This isn't ordinary silk. This is imported maybe from India or Bactria. The embroidery has weight to it. a lion's mane composed of hundreds of hand-stitched threads. Anahita lifts her arms and the robe slips down over her shoulders like liquid moonlight. The fabric falls into place without a wrinkle, as if it was waiting for her. But the dress alone isn't the full message. Now comes the adornment, the punctuation to the sentence she's crafting. A jewelry box is opened with care. Inside dozens of pieces all catalogued like weapons. She doesn't pick the flashiest necklace or the heaviest earrings. She chooses 3 items: a wide choker of gold links studded with carnelian earrings shaped like tiny crescents, and a bronze armband etched with the image of a cypress tree, long, narrow, reaching for heaven. The message: I am rooted and I rise. She fastens the choker herself. No shaking fingers, no second guesses. Just a click of the clasp and a tilt of her chin. Next cosmetics. A servant brings forward a tray containing tiny jars. One holds ground malachite green and shimmery. Another is filled with powdered coal fine as ash. Anahita lifts the malachite first, dabs it lightly to her eyelids, then draws a line of black that arcs like a hawk's wing across her brow bone. Not theatrical, just enough to draw focus. The malachite isn't just decoration either. Some believed it protected the wearer from envy or bad luck. Or maybe it was just that the color made your enemies forget what they were about to say. Some noble Persian women were said to crush beetle shells and mix them with dates to make lip pigment. Whether or not that's true, you wouldn't put it past anyone in this room. Power stains after all. Why not the mouth? A breeze moves through the chamber as a curtain is drawn back to let in filtered afternoon light. It catches her just as she applies rose-scented oil to her temples. The light glints off the golden thread in her robe, and suddenly Anahita isn't just prepared, she's radiant. And not in the floral, romantic sense. She shines like armor. She moves toward a second table, this one laid with accessories that go beyond beauty. Seals. Yes, those seals again. Bronze cylinders carved with her unique insignia. One is for contracts, another for estate reports. She checks the pouch at her hip and slots 2 of them inside like a knight sheathing knives. Lose one of these and your household collapses. Anahita double-checks them. You would too. Her belt is handed over last. A wide sash of wine-colored linen with narrow lines of script embroidered into it. You lean in, trying to read. It's not decorative, it's a hymn. A line from a Zoroastrian prayer invoking strength and light. Not the kind of detail a guest at dinner would ever notice, but a rival might. And rivals notice everything. Historians still debate how much freedom noble women had in curating their wardrobes. Were they dressing for themselves, for husbands, for court protocol? But watching Anahita, the answer becomes clear. She's not dressing to please. She's dressing to signal. Her robes are negotiation. Her eyeliner is defense. Her jewelry, that's legislation with a clasp. Her sandals come, last soft leather dyed with madder root. The soles tinted a pale red that only the wealthy could afford. The dye stains faintly, so wherever she steps, she leaves a quiet trail. Most people wouldn't notice. Those who do, they remember. She approaches the mirror once more. This time she lingers. One hand adjusts a strand of hair. Another lifts to her earring, just a touch. She tilts her head and her gaze sharpens. If she's tired, you can't tell. If she's worried, she'll never show it. She is fully assembled, fully armored, and then a final item is placed into her palm, a small ceramic jar, round as a plum. Inside a paste of ground mint and dried rose petals mixed with oil. She touches it to her wrist, then presses both hands together, sealing the scent. Not overwhelming. Just enough to linger in the air after she leaves a room. That's the trick, isn't it? She won't just attend tonight's banquet. She'll haunt it. You imagine yourself trying to pull this off. You'd probably trip on your own robe's knees while applying coal and spill scented oil on the guest list. Anahita, meanwhile, could mediate a property dispute with one eyebrow raised and start a minor war with a mismatched bangle if she wanted to. She crosses the chamber to the doorway. A servant lifts the curtain. Light floods in golden and soft. Her silhouette sharpens. Her sandals whisper against the stone. And then she's gone. You stay behind alone with the shimmer of oil, the faint echo of perfume, and the sense that something massive just passed through the room. Fashion here is not vanity, it's vocabulary. And tonight, Anahita's going to speak volumes. The banquet hall hums before she even arrives, long before the first tray of honeyed lamb is set down, or the musicians pluck their first note from the cita, whispers swirl through the marble corridors. The torches are already lit, the floors polished to mirror brightness. Gold-leafed tapestries depicting lion hunts and royal weddings shimmer on the walls. Servants move like shadows, laying out fig-stuffed pastries and filling clay bowls with pomegranate wine so dark it gleams like ink, and then the music pauses. Because she's here. Anahita steps into the hall like a breeze carrying perfume. Not too loud, not too soft, just noticeable enough to shift every gaze toward her without effort. Her robe, that midnight blue with gold lions, flows as she walks its hem, whispering secrets across the floor. The lion brooch on her shoulder catches the torchlight and throws it back into the eyes of her competitors. There's no announcement. She doesn't need one. The room is already bent around her. You watch the other women straighten slightly, subtle corrections of posture, quick glances to check earrings, headscarves, smiles. One woman actually retucks a fold of her robe behind her elbow, like she's trying to be invisible and visible at the same time. It's not fear. Not quite. It's awareness. The kind that says she remembers everything and I should have worn my better sandals. Tonight's gathering is not a festival, not a royal wedding, not even an official court function. It's something more delicate, a dinner with implications. Several noble families have sent representatives. There's a widow from Ekbatana with 2 marriageable daughters, a merchant's cousin whose shipping contracts are tangled with Anahita's estate, a minor satrap who brought his niece along charming, observant, possibly ambitious. In a room like this, nothing is ever just about food. Anahita moves from guest to guest with effortless grace. She greets with the perfect balance of warmth and restraint. Her lips curve just enough to imply kindness, but never enough to suggest weakness. When she compliments the satrap's niece, it's for her cleverness, not her dress. When she accepts the widow's offered plate of almond cakes, she doesn't eat one, but she does place it beside her own tray. The message is clear. I see you and I choose not to bite yet. She takes her place near the center of the table. Not the head, no. That's reserved for a visiting cousin of the king, who is already 3 cups into the wine and well on his way to quoting Zoroaster incorrectly. But Anahita's seat is strategic near the power, but not too close, within reach of every conversation. From here, she can see the widow, the satrap, the niece, and the steward refilling cups a little too often. She doesn't sip her wine yet. She watches. You notice something else too. She's not the only woman playing this game. Across from her, a woman in a robe, dyed with crushed saffron picks at her lentils, but hasn't spoken a word. Every now and then, her fingers trace the rim of her wine cup as though drawing invisible symbols. To her left, another woman older with streaks of silver in her braids casually praises a dance performance from last month. That dancer was from Anahita's household. A compliment? Maybe. Or a reminder. Historians still debate how often these women directly competed, or if their rivalries were exaggerated by later writers. You watch the way they eye each other and think, oh, it was real. Here's a curious little fact. Some Persian brides were said to carry pomegranates at their wedding, the seeds symbolizing fertility. If one dropped during the ceremony, it was seen as an omen of barrenness or discord. You wonder how many women practiced walking in complete silence while clutching a fragile fruit. Tonight, though, no one's holding one. Every step still carries that same pressure. Don't drop your composure. Don't crack your image, or someone will notice and talk. The meal begins, and it is no casual affair. Each dish arrives like a declaration. Roasted lamb with coriander and dried apricots. Lentils cooked with tamarind. Grape leaves stuffed with honeyed walnuts. Everything is rich, fragrant, and carefully chosen. The almond cakes, you learn later, were spiced with cinnamon imported through 2 different trade routes. That's not cuisine. That's diplomacy in a pastry. Anahita eats slowly, barely, just enough to appear gracious, never distracted. She asks about the health of the satrap's horses, knowing full well that one of them threw a rider last month. She praised the cousin's son's handwriting, based on a tablet he likely didn't write himself. She offers condolences to the widow about her late husband's brother, whose estate recently passed into Anahita's control. Every word lands softly, every sentence closes a loop, or opens a door, or places a stone right where she wants it. You try to imagine yourself here. You'd probably get wine on your sleeve, mispronounce someone's name, and accidentally agree to marry off your cousin to a goat herder, Anahita. She's threading needles between syllables. And then comes the moment. One of the younger women makes a joke. It's clever, a little pointed, but everyone laughs. Except Anahita. She smiles, then replies not sharply, not cruelly, but with a soft little phrase that includes a proverb about rivers that dry up in spring. No one else seems to notice the undertone, but the girl who made the joke blushes and looks down. You don't know what just happened, but you know who won. Later, as the meal ends and the sweet dishes are brought out, pistachio sweets dusted with cardamom bowls of chilled pomegranate juice, you see Anahita lean over to speak quietly with the merchant's cousin. Nothing dramatic, nothing prolonged. Just a few soft words, a brief touch to the wrist, and then she leans back. You'll never know what was said, but tomorrow grain will move faster through the port. A border dispute will soften. A servant will be dismissed, and Anahita will be praised for her grace and poise as if that's all she brought to the table. The room is warmer now, the air thick with spice and sweat and satisfaction. She rises, bows her head slightly, and exits the hall, not with fanfare, not with flourish, just with the silence of someone who's already said everything she needed to say. And as you sit there watching the torchlight flicker over half-empty plates and half-finished arguments, you realize something. This wasn't a meal. It was a battlefield. And she didn't raise her voice once. The next morning, before the lamps are even lit, you find yourself in another part of the palace, a chamber so still it feels like breath held in stone. No food, no perfume, no laughter, just the quiet scratch of a stylus against clay and the occasional rustle of papyrus. This is not a room for feasting. It's a room for sharpening minds. At the center of the room sits a girl, no more than 12 legs, folded beneath her on a cushion the color of faded saffron. Her back is straight, her hair braided in a long coiled plait that drapes down one shoulder. In front of her lies a clay tablet and a stylus made of bone. Her eyes do not waver. Her hand doesn't tremble. She's writing. Meet Artistone, daughter of a noble house, perhaps even of the king himself. She is not playing with dolls. She is not being taught to embroider samplers of flowers. She is being prepared to rule, or at the very least to influence those who do. Around the 500 BCE noble girls in the Achaemenid Empire, especially those in royal families, received a very particular kind of education. Reading and writing, yes, but also astronomy to chart the stars, mathematics to manage estates, and poetry to sway hearts when numbers failed. Artistone recites softly under her breath, quoting a line from a sacred hymn. Her tutor, a woman older than the tablet she grades, sits silently to the side, listening for the slightest stumble. The lesson is relentless. Precision matters. Get a word wrong in poetry and you lose face. Get a number wrong on a grain tally and a village starves. And then of course there's courtly speech, flattery with fangs, politeness that doubles as power. The tutor shifts topics without warning. If your cousin claims inheritance to your uncle's land, but your father holds the king's seal, what is the argument you must make? Artistone doesn't blink. The seal overrules the claim. But I would first appeal to memory. Remind the king of the day my cousin misspoke in the Temple of Fire. The tutor gives a short nod. The lesson continues. You watch her and try to imagine what it would be like to carry this kind of weight before your body even knows how to carry its own bones. You recall how at 12 your greatest worry was probably choosing between snacks. Artistone is memorizing how to manipulate satraps before she's grown her second molar. A servant brings a small bowl of dried apricots. She doesn't eat yet. Not until she's finished copying the table of cuneiform numbers etched before her. One misstroke and it's useless. One smudged edge and it's disaster. In this palace, tablets are like voices. They can speak for you even when you're not in the room. That's why she learns now how to speak when silence is safer. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some royal girls were trained to play the barbat, a lute-like instrument whose strings were tuned to the movement of stars. The idea was that music could soften men's pride, make allies weep, or turn a banquet into a political theater. Whether or not they performed often, the symbolism stuck. Artistone's fingers too have calluses, not from the stylus alone. Her barbat rests in the corner ready for his lesson later. Historians still argue how much influence these educated girls actually wielded. Some say they were used as polished ornaments displayed at court to impress foreign envoys. Others believe they became advisors in all but name, correcting governors in whispered asides, guiding their sons with veiled threats, disguised as bedtime stories. You watch Artistone today and feel certain she will not be ornament. She is learning to strike quietly. The tutor shifts the lesson to star charts. Artistone rolls out a scroll and begins to point Orion Pleiades, the path of Anahita's chariot across the dawn. She's not learning this for fun. In Persian, thought stars governed fate. To read the stars was to understand the patterns of ambition. You remember the banquet last night, how Anahita timed every word like the phases of the moon. Maybe she once sat on the same cushion tracing these same stars. The tutor raises an eyebrow. What do you do when a satrap's son refuses to listen? Artistone, ask his mother. The tutor chuckles once, just once, and then resumes. No praise. Not yet. That's not how future queens are made. There's a tapestry on the wall behind her, not of kings or soldiers, but of a lioness guarding her cubs. A symbol perhaps of how the strongest rulers aren't those who roar, but those who watch, wait, protect, and only strike when the cub is in danger. You wonder if the lioness was chosen on purpose. Everything in this room seems like it was. As the sun begins to rise higher and the air warms, the tutor shifts to poetry. Artistone reads a line aloud. He who rules with flame shall fall to wind unless his daughter whispers smoke into song. She reads it not like a child reciting words, but like someone who understands. Her voice dips on the last phrase, eyes narrowing just slightly. She knows what it means. She knows who the smoke is. You wonder briefly if you'd survive 5 minutes in this classroom. Probably not. You'd mispronounce a river, misplace a decimal, and weep into your fig tea while the tutor raised a single judgmental eyebrow. But Artistone is calm, focused, relentless. And make no mistake, this isn't about preparing her for marriage. This is about giving her teeth behind her smile. If a son inherits the sword, a daughter is handed the map. And someone has to know where the traps are hidden. You watch as the tutor dismisses her with a quiet word. Artistone finally reaches for the apricots. She eats 2, then folds the bowl's cloth lid back in place, preserving the rest. Another lesson. Moderation in all things. Even sweetness. As she gathers her scrolls and tablets, you see the faint imprint of her seal on the sash around her waist, a crescent moon cradled inside a circle of stars. Her symbol, her authority. She passes by you without a word, her step silent, her shoulders steady. You get the sense that someday she will walk through rooms where others lower their eyes, where her silence will be more powerful than most speeches. And when that day comes, it will be because of mornings like this, taught in whispers, sharpened by stars, tempered by apricots and ink. From the palace's carved columns and golden-hemmed corridors, you step into something that feels entirely different, louder, dustier, more alive. The palace fades behind you, and suddenly you're in the heart of Susa's bazaar, where the streets pulse with the heat of mid-morning sun and the echo of trade voices shouting over sacks of lentils, the creak of wooden carts, the slap of sandals on packed earth. You don't drift here, you get swept. This is where politics wears sandals and negotiates over barley. And at the center of it all is a woman. Bronze seal at her waist, woven basket on her hip, expression sharp enough to slice a pomegranate. Her name is Shiran, and while she doesn't sit on a throne or command a silk-draped banquet hall, she rules here in the market where fortunes turn over clay jars and whispered discounts. She passes a stall selling indigo-dyed linen. The merchant greets her with exaggerated cheer, calling her Madam Scribe, though she never holds a pen. That's because her seal does the writing. She lifts it worn smooth at the edges from years of use, presses it into a tiny clay tag on the linen, and nods once. The deal is done. No signature needed, no scroll. That tiny cylinder carved with her family's crest, a date palm encircled by 6 dots, speaks volumes. It's her currency, her identity, her reputation all rolled into one. Not bad for someone who doesn't have an official title. In ancient Persia, women like Shiran, wives of mid-ranking officials, daughters of wealthy merchants, or widows running family estates, often acted as economic agents. They could own property, lend goods, issue contracts, and negotiate deals, especially when their husbands were away serving the empire or more often conveniently drunk somewhere. Some scholars argue these women were mere proxies for absent men. Others insist they were the backbone of local trade. Watching Shiran haggle over barley weights with a Bactrian trader who's sweating through his tunic, you'd bet on the latter. She moves fast. 1 minute, she's adjusting the price of sheep wool based on last week's shipment from the Zagros hills. The next, she's inspecting pomegranate seeds for signs of rot. Her fingers move quickly, expertly, like they've counted coins and measured grain since before she could walk. A servant hands her a tablet. Someone wants to adjust a delivery time. She doesn't even look up as she answers, "Tell them if the cart arrives past moonrise, I'll double the fee." She's not bluffing. Here's a quirky fact. Some merchant women used knotted cords, colorful strings tied in specific patterns to track debts and deliveries, like a physical spreadsheet tucked into your sleeve. Each knot meant something: a full jar of oil, a half-paid loan, a goat promised in 3 days. If the knot came undone accidentally, disaster. There's a rumor that one woman in Sardis tied the wrong knot, accidentally forgave a debt, and had to chase the debtor across 2 provinces to reclaim her olive grove. Shiran. She checks her cord 3 times before moving on. You try to follow, but the bazaar pulls at you, smells of turmeric and grilled onions, flashes of blue-glazed pottery, the sound of someone shouting about cinnamon from India. You duck as a flock of squawking chickens erupts from a nearby stall, flapping past 2 boys carrying jugs of water. It's chaos. Glorious, dusty, spiced chaos. Shiran, though, never flinches. She stops at a clay jar filled with thick, dark honey. She removes the lid, dips a reed stick inside, smells it. Then, without tasting, says, "You watered this down. A full dinar less." The seller protests, but she's already walking away, gesturing for her assistant to mark the vendor's stall for review. You get the sense that review doesn't mean a polite conversation later. It means no more deals, no more, possibly no more customers. The merchant turns pale. This isn't intimidation for its own sake, it's consistency. In a city like Susa, where caravans arrive daily with spices, ivory, and silk, where markets operate on trust more than paperwork, women like Shiran enforce the rules with their reputations. If her seal appears on a tablet, it's as good as law. You pause beside her as she kneels to inspect a basket of pistachios. One is cracked. She rolls it between her fingers. Then she says, "Send the rest to my sister's house," with a note the merchant asked if she'd marry him. That'll make her laugh. Her assistant giggles. You do too. But even in jokes, Shiran's always moving something forward. You picture yourself doing this. You probably overpay for the first jar of saffron, forget your own seal, and trade a whole sack of grain for a bag of shiny rocks. And when you'd realize your mistake, Shiran would already be gone 3 alleys away, closing a deal on sesame oil with a priest's brother-in-law. Suddenly, the air shifts. A low hum ripples through the market. The caravans arrived. You can hear the bells, the slow grind of hooves on packed clay, the smell of camel sweat and cinnamon hitting the street like thunder. Everyone turns. Shiran doesn't. She already knows what she ordered. She already knows what came in. And if it didn't, someone's getting their kneecaps metaphorically rearranged. The Bactrian trader from earlier is back mumbling something about weights being off. Shiran raises one eyebrow. The trader winces. No need to check, he blurts, "I'll fix the invoice." She nods once. No drama, no shouting, just presence. A historian might argue that women like Shiran were rare, that the Persian world still bent to male authority. And sure, on paper it did. But paper is flammable. And in markets like these, fire spreads fast and whispers faster. Shiran's name isn't etched on a monument, but the grain, she buys the wool, she moves the oil, she taxes, those keep cities alive. As the sun climbs higher, she tugs her shawl over her head and checks the position of the shadows. Time to head home. Her work is done, but only for now. There are tallies to review chords, to knot tablets to store in clay jars. Tonight she'll host a cousin for dinner. Tomorrow she might petition for a tax exemption or lend grain to a widow whose son serves in the military. As she vanishes into the crowd, you realize that if queens shape empires with fire altars and alliances, then women like Shiran fuel them grain by grain, deal by deal, and she does it all without raising her voice. Just a seal, just a nod, just a woman who knows exactly how much power weighs and how to carry it without letting anyone see her sweat. The noise of the market fades behind you as the streets narrow and the air shifts. You pass through a colonnade shaded with grapevines and follow the scent of something older than perfume, heavier than incense. The laughter of merchants gives way to the hush of ritual, and the dust gives way to stone smoothed by centuries of reverence. You're no longer in the bazaar. You're entering sacred space. The grove is quiet, not silent, just deeply still, like the world holding its breath. It's a clearing encircled by tall cypress trees, their tops swaying faintly in the dusk breeze. In the center is a fire altar raised on a platform of carved stone, its corners decorated with lion's paws and lotus petals. Flames rise from its bowl, fed slowly by sandalwood and myrrh. A low hum drifts through the grove, not music, not chanting, just the soft murmur of women speaking in the language of stars. This is a Zoroastrian fire ceremony, and tonight you are a shadow at its edge. The women here wear long robes in earth tones, ochres, indigos, russets. Their heads are covered with light veils woven with silver threads that catch the firelight and shimmer like dew. One of them stands out immediately. Her movements are careful, deliberate, and she carries herself like someone who walks both the world and the divine. Her name, whispered between the trees, is Vera. She is a priestess, not the high-ranking magi of imperial courts, but no mere attendant either. Women like Vera were vital to local temples and sacred rites, acting as keepers of flame, healers, astrologers, and storytellers. Some historians argue that women were limited in Zoroastrian religious authority, but others point to temple records suggesting otherwise. You watch Vera's every motion, and there's no doubt in your mind she's in command. She approaches the altar and adds a chip of resin to the fire. The flame crackles in thanks. She lifts a small clay vessel and sprinkles a few drops of rose water onto the stone platform, murmuring a phrase in Avestan, the sacred language of the religion. It sounds like a whisper across water, unfamiliar and yet unmistakably ancient. The words mean, "May this flame carry the truth of all things." Around her, the other women follow suit. One offers barley, another milk, another a pressed wreath of dried blossoms. These offerings aren't grand. They're precise, symbolic. Every item speaks to creation, nourishment, balance. The fire isn't just sacred, it's alive. A divine witness, a cosmic mirror. You step closer and the warmth touches your face, not harsh but insistent. This isn't the soft glow of candlelight at a banquet. This is the flame that has burned since the first prayers were sung into stone. It does not ask for attention. It demands respect. Vera kneels and begins a chant. Her voice is low but strong, like a song sung in the throat of the earth. The words spiral into the sky, a rhythm older than any king's name. The other women join in, some following others, adding harmony. Together their voices rise in waves and the air shifts. Even the trees seem to lean in. During certain rites, priestesses wore veils woven with silver thread, not just for beauty, but for belief. The shimmer was thought to channel light from Ahura Mazda, the supreme deity of Zoroastrianism. If a thread snagged or broke during a ritual, it was considered an omen, sometimes of illness, sometimes of divine warning. You watch as Vera adjusts hers with practiced ease. No snags, no warnings, just precision. A girl barely older than Artie Stone approaches the flame with a copper bowl of dried mint and places it at Vera's feet. The mint's scent curls through the grove, crisp and clean, cutting through the heavier smoke. Vera nods gently, touches the girl's shoulder, and the child bows. She'll grow into this role one day, but tonight she watches, learns, absorbs. Vera rises again, her hands faintly calloused from years of tending flame. Her fingers are stained with ash. You realize something: her power doesn't come from jewelry or titles. It comes from repetition, from quiet, from holding the line between sacred and profane every single day without fail. She walks slowly around the fire, her sandals brushing the stone. With each step, she murmurs names of ancestors, of gods, of those who have passed. This isn't mourning, it's memory. She is speaking the dead back into relevance, into light. You feel your own breath slow, your shoulders drop. You aren't just observing anymore, you are part of this. And just like that, the chant shifts. It softens, dims. The women kneel together, some close their eyes, some look up at the sky where stars begin to pierce the violet dusk. The fire crackles its heart, glowing white-hot, steady and eternal. No one moves. For a moment, even the birds fall quiet. And then the ritual ends, but not all at once. But not all not with applause or dismissal, just a long exhale, a release. The fire continues to burn, of course. It always does. Vera turns, meets your gaze just for a second. There's no invitation, no challenge, just recognition. As if to say, you've seen the palace, you've seen the power of seals and robes and banquets. Now you've seen this. And you understand. They are the same. You try to imagine yourself in her place. You'd probably trip on your veil, sing off key, and accidentally drop the rose water into the fire. But Vera, she wouldn't blink. She'd bless the moment and move on. Because that's what priestesses do. They carry the divine through imperfect hands. As the women begin to leave the grove silent, barefoot, graceful, you remain behind, letting the heat wash over your skin one last time. The flames don't flicker. They pulse. You recall Anahita's private shrine where she whispered a prayer before her banquet. You think of Shiran's marketplace where trade moved like lit incense on a breeze. And now Vera, holding sacred flame without ever raising her voice. Together they form a pattern, a constellation. And here in the hush of the grove, you finally see how it all connects. You leave the sacred grove with the scent of myrrh still clinging to your clothes, the memory of flame flickering just behind your eyelids. But instead of returning to the palace or the market or the gardens of nobility, you follow the winding path of smoke and silence until it leads you somewhere quieter, still into a small herb-scented room on the edge of Susa. The walls here are clay smoothed by hand, their surface painted with simple floral patterns. Clay lamps flicker gently in the corners, casting a warm glow over bundles of dried plants hanging from wooden beams. There's no throne, no altar, no silk, only Zeba the healer. She moves with the calm of someone who has done this for years, too many to count. Her hands are stained yellow with turmeric, her sleeves pushed up to the elbow, her feet bare against the cool packed earth. She kneels beside a child no older than 7, feverish and restless beneath a woven blanket. The mother sits nearby, twisting her hands, silent. Zeba doesn't speak much either. She hums softly, an old melody you don't recognize but feel deep in your ribs. She reaches for a mortar and begins to grind a mixture of dried willow bark and coriander. The rhythm is slow, steady, almost hypnotic. Each movement is a kind of prayer, each breath a decision. In ancient Persia, healing was not separate from religion or politics. It wove through every layer of life. Women like Zeba, especially in villages or lower noble households, were the first line of defense against fever injury, childbirth complications, nightmares, poisonings, and everything in between. Some learned from their mothers. Others studied under temple healers. Some just listened to herbs, to people, to time. She leans over the child and murmurs something. The words are simple, soothing. She lifts a damp cloth and presses it gently to the boy's forehead. You can see the tension in the mother's shoulders begin to ease just slightly. Zeba adds a dab of honey and turmeric to a clay bowl, mixes in a few drops of oil, then uses her finger to draw a spiral on the boy's chest. Not magic. Memory. A technique passed down from healer to healer, not written in scrolls, but etched into the skin by repetition. Some Persian healers were said to keep amulets shaped like scorpions tied to string and worn beneath their tunics. Not because they liked drama, but because they believed the amulet would sting away illness. If the string broke, it was considered a very bad sign. You glance at Zeba's neck and spot a leather cord peeking out from beneath her collar. You don't ask. She wouldn't tell you anyway. The air in the room thickens with the smell of crushed mint and the slight sharpness of vinegar. A small clay jar bubbles faintly on a trivet over a low flame. Zeba tastes it with the tip of a reed, nods, then pours a spoonful into a cup and hands it to the mother. For his breath, she says, that's all. Historians still debate how much authority women healers like Zeba truly had. Some argue they were second class to male physicians who studied Babylonian medical texts in temple schools. Others point out that for most families, especially those without wealth, women were the only doctors they ever trusted. Watching Zeba now, it's not about hierarchy. It's about presence. When people are scared, they come to the one who knows which herb to choose and when to say nothing at all. Zeba checks the boy's pulse, counts his breaths, then lays out a small sachet of dried chamomile and crushed date seed. She hands it to the mother. Hang this near his bed, she says. If the fever rises again, soak it in water and press it to his chest. The mother nods, biting her lip to keep from crying. Zeba says nothing more. You look around the room. Clay jars line the shelves, each one labeled in scratched ink, some in Old Persian, others in local dialects. You see bundles of sage, dried orange peel, ginger root, and what looks like powdered bark from a tamarisk tree. Zeba moves among them like a scholar in a library, but faster, more instinctively. You try to imagine yourself in her position. You'd probably confuse cumin with fennel, accidentally mix a sleeping draught with laxative powder, and be banished to goat duty by sundown. Ziba. She barely glances at her tools. She knows each by touch. A young boy appears at the door, panting, holding his arm. He's scraped it badly, blood oozing through a linen wrap. Ziba's already moving. She rinses the wound with vinegar, applies a salve made of myrrh and ground date pit, then bandages it tightly with linen strips dipped in honey. No flinching, no panic, just steps. The boy nods his thanks and runs off. Ziba doesn't even pause to accept praise. She walks to a small niche in the wall where an oil lamp flickers beside a simple clay figurine, maybe a household goddess, or just a symbol of protection. She closes her eyes for a moment, places her hand on the wall, and murmurs something under her breath. It's not a plea. It's a pause. You recall the fire priestess Vera, her veil, her chants, her flame. Ziba is no less sacred. She just burns quieter. A breeze rustles the herbs overhead. The mother has fallen asleep against the wall, the child breathing more steadily now. Ziba stands and begins preparing another mix, this one for a pregnant neighbor due in 3 weeks. You realize she never really stops. The people come in waves, and she's the shore that doesn't move. There's a calmness in this room you didn't expect. No titles, no banquets, just survival wrapped in steam and bitter herbs and the soft clatter of ceramic lids. By the door, a girl waits holding a string of copper coins in one hand. She's nervous. Ziba takes one look and says, "Keep them. Bring me 2 eggs next week." The girl nods and vanishes into the dusk. It's nearly dark now. The oil lamps flicker low. Ziba rolls up her sleeves again, wipes her hands on her apron, and kneels beside another basket, another ailment waiting to be solved. You don't know how long she'll stay here tonight. Maybe until the moon rises, maybe until the last fever breaks, because in a world of queens and priestesses and market rulers, someone still has to heal the body when all else fails. Someone still has to sit with the sick, grind the bark, stir the pot, and whisper calm into a frightened parent's heart. And tonight, that someone is Ziba. And no one, not even the king, could replace her. The night deepens, and you follow its quiet thread into the inner courtyard of a noble home in Persepolis. But this time, you're not here to witness a banquet or listen to trade negotiations. The breeze carries a softer sound, hushed voices, a woman's measured breath, and somewhere, nearby, the sharp, small cry of a newborn just beginning to announce its presence in the world. You've arrived at a birthing chamber, a space rarely described in scrolls, yet foundational to the empire's continuity. The stars above flicker faintly through an open lattice as oil lamps glow low on every surface. Their flickering light makes shadows move like water across the painted walls, which depict stylized gardens full of flowers dear and flowing springs, images of peace, of growth, maybe distractions, maybe prayers. In the center of the room, on a low mat of thick woven wool, lies a noblewoman, her robe pushed up to her knees, her face slick with sweat and the effort of hours. She grips a birthing rope, a sturdy length of cloth tied to a carved wooden beam above her, pulling against it with every contraction. The rope is dyed with saffron, a symbol of health and luck, but right now it might as well be a lifeline. Beside her kneels Mahin the midwife. Midwives like Mahin were central figures in both noble and common households during childbirth. They were healers, commanders, comforters, and witnesses. Often trained by their own mothers or aunts, these women held generations of knowledge in their hands. In elite families, they were selected with great care and held in something like sacred esteem, especially when the child-to-be was tied to political futures. Mahin doesn't speak loudly. Her voice is low but firm, rhythmic as a drum beat. "Breathe," she says, and again, and hold. The noblewoman obeys, her eyes squeezing shut, every muscle in her body straining. Around them other women assist in silence. One fans the laboring mother with a palm leaf, another prepares warm water, and another arranges folded linens and clay bowls filled with saffron oil, honey, and pomegranate juice. This isn't just a physical trial. This is ceremony. Each step follows tradition. Each object in the room has been chosen not only for function, but for meaning. A small clay bowl of barley rests at the foot of the mat, placed there to invoke prosperity. A sprig of dried mint hangs in a niche above the door to ward off wandering spirits. A figurine of Anahita, goddess of fertility and water, has been placed near the threshold facing inward. These items, simple in appearance, carry centuries of hope and superstition. Some midwives carried tiny silver charms shaped like crescent moons, which they tucked beneath the mother's cushion or mat for luck. If the charm slipped out during labor, it was seen as a bad omen. And you can bet the room would fall still, all eyes watching whether Mahin calmly tucked it back into place or quietly replaced it with another before anyone noticed. You sit in the corner still and quiet, watching the rhythm of the room. Everything happens in waves. The woman cries out, then falls into silence. The assistants shift like tides. Mahin pours warm saffron oil onto her palms, rubs them together, and begins massaging the mother's lower back. Her movements are practiced, strong, yet gentle. You wonder how many births she's attended, how many children she's lifted into the air with hands stained by herbs and exhaustion. Not all births go smoothly. Everyone here knows that, especially Mahin. You see it in the way she watches the mother's face, listens not just to the cries, but the breath, the trembling between contractions. You can almost hear the calculations in her head. How long? How hard? How close? But her face never shows fear, only focus. Historians debate the exact roles of midwives in Achaemenid society, whether they held formal training or were informally passed along through generations. Some say they were low in social status. Others point to burial records that honor them like minor nobility. Watching Mahin now, the debate feels irrelevant. She is command, she is care, she is everything at once. A sharp sound cuts through the chamber. The woman's breath catches. A final piercing cry, and then silence. And then a wet, shuddering wail. The room shifts all at once. Not loudly, not dramatically, but like something invisible has been exhaled. The assistants move with practiced speed. One brings a warm cloth. Another hands Mahin a bronze knife polished to a mirror shine. With great care she cuts the umbilical cord, tying it neatly with a dyed thread. She does not smile yet. She checks the child first, eyes, mouth, pulse, breath. Then she nods. It's a girl, she says, calm, clear, no hesitation. The mother sighs, not in disappointment, but in relief. A girl means alliance. A girl means marriage one day. Political leverage. Another thread to be woven into the vast tapestry of noble families and satrapic loyalties. She will not wear a crown, most likely, but she may bear one, or shape one. And that is enough. Mahin wraps the child in linen, presses a kiss to her brow, and places her gently onto her mother's chest. The newborn's cry fades to a gurgling whimper, then silence, then breath. Breath is victory here. In a corner, a servant prepares a tray of dates and almonds, traditional foods offered after birth. Dates for energy, almonds for sweetness, a sign that hardship is past and nourishment is next. The mother eats slowly, eyes closed, her free hand still curled around the baby's tiny foot. You try to imagine yourself here. You'd probably panic at the first contraction, faint at the second, and wake up just in time to drop the knife into the honey bowl. But Mahin, she's already preparing a new batch of oil, already thinking ahead. The baby will need herbal baths. The mother will need fig syrup to restore her strength. There is no pause. The women clean the space quietly. The saffron oil is wiped from the mat. The barley is gathered into a cloth and will be buried near the garden, feeding the earth that gave them life. The Anahita figurine is left in place for 3 more days, just to be sure. Mahin finally sits. Her body slumps slightly. Her eyes close for a beat too long. But when the mother thanks, her Mahin only replies, "Sleep now. I'll watch," and she does. She watches as the baby curls against her mother, as the lamps flicker lower, as the stars realign outside the lattice window. This isn't just birth, it's passage. From one world into another, from potential into presence. And the women here, not just Mahin, but all of them have walked beside that threshold again and again, carrying others across. No fanfare, no records, no monuments, just breath, just life, just the quiet miracle of a girl who now breathes beneath the stars. The sun rises slowly over the rooftops of a rural village tucked far from Persepolis' grand columns and Susa's winding markets. Here there are no banquet halls or sacred groves, no marble courtyards or embroidered cushions, just earth cracked and warm beneath your sandals, just work steady and endless. And at the center of it all, there is a woman bent over a flat stone grinding grain with the quiet rhythm of someone who has done this every single morning of her life. Her name is Nazarene, and she is a farmer's wife, or more precisely, she is the farmer. Her husband has been conscripted into military service, sent to a garrison near the eastern border, where no one really knows what's happening. His letters come rarely, if at all. And even if he were here, this rhythm would still be hers. The courtyard hums with life. A goat bleats from its pen. A child yells something about spilled water. A bundle of firewood topples. The world does not wait. Nazarene presses harder into the grindstone, her hands white with flour. She hums under her breath, not a song really, just a habit to keep her going. Outside the mud brick wall, the sky is turning the color of dried figs. In the Achaemenid Empire, women in rural villages like this one formed the invisible machinery of daily life. They managed the homes, cared for animals, wove fabric, processed food, collected water, raised children, negotiated with neighbors, and kept the family alive with little support and even less recognition. There were no scribes here, no court poets, but there was always bread to be made and a roof to patch before the monsoon rains. You sit quietly in a shady corner of the courtyard as Nazarene kneads dough, her arms strong from repetition. Her dress is simple, tied at the waist with a faded cord. A clay token hangs from it shaped like a small bird worn smooth from touch. It's her tally. Every time she shares grain or lentils with a neighbor, she makes a mark on the token. It's a rustic system of accounting, but it works. And here's a quirky tidbit. If one of these tokens broke, it was considered bad luck, and the kids usually got blamed whether they did it or not. A neighbor calls over the wall, holding up a basket of dried figs. Nazarene nods, trades her a small loaf of fresh flatbread, and throws in a handful of mint for good measure. No coins exchange hands. In this world, trust is the currency and favors are worth more than gold. You try to picture yourself in her place. You'd probably burn the bread insult the neighbor with your poor accent and get pecked by the chickens before noon. Nazarene. She's already moved on to her next task, checking lentil rows in the small plot behind her house. You follow brushing past a swaying wall of sunflowers and watch as she inspects each plant, pinching leaves, flicking bugs away with the back of her hand. Farming here is not measured by spreadsheets or scrolls. It's measured by gut instinct and the color of the soil beneath your fingernails. One bad harvest and a whole family goes hungry. One good season and maybe there's enough to send a daughter to live with cousins in Susa for schooling or service. But it's always a gamble. The sun climbs. She wipes her brow with the corner of her scarf and shoos a goat out of the lentil bed. The goat stares back defiantly, chewing as if to say, "I live here too." She doesn't argue, just guides it back with a stick and a muttered phrase you don't quite catch. Back at the house, a loom clacks in the corner. Her daughter may be 10 years old, weaving strips of cloth for trade. The girl glances up, smiles, then returns to her rhythm. Her fingers move with purpose, already learning what the world demands of her. Not just skill, not just silence, but endurance. Nazarene returns with a basket of greens. She sets to work, preparing lunch, a thick stew of lentils, onion, and a hint of sumac. She stirs it over a fire pit while kneading a second batch of dough with her foot against the bowl to keep it stable. Multitasking. Persian village edition. Here's the thing, this life might look small from the outside, but when you sit in it, you begin to understand how big it really is. This courtyard, this stew, these cloths, these are the things that keep the empire functioning. No soldier marches without bread, no merchant trades without cloth, no taxes paid without land to harvest from, and behind every step there is a woman like Nazarene, bent, calloused, tireless. Historians often gloss over rural women. There are fewer records, fewer names. Their labor isn't written in stone, but it is woven into everything. You remember the noblewoman Anahita, who managed estates and hosted banquets. You recall Vera, who kept sacred flame. And now Nazarene, who keeps goats out of lentils and families fed without fanfare. As the sun begins its slow descent, Nazarene fills clay jugs with water from a nearby well. She balances one on her hip, another on her shoulder, and doesn't spill a drop. Her children run ahead barefoot and laughing. Her shadow stretches long across the courtyard. She doesn't pause to admire it. She's got onions to chop. You try to imagine asking her what it's like to be just a farmer's wife. She'd probably laugh, point to her grain jars and say, "Ask me that when they're full in winter." The stew finishes cooking. She tastes it, nods once, then ladles it into bowls made from hardened gourd. Her youngest claps. The goat bleats again, stubbornly eyeing the lentils. A chicken hops the wall. Another neighbor calls out from across the way something about borrowing a net. Nazarene sighs, stands and walks over with a ladle in one hand and a rope in the other. The empire doesn't recognize her name, but it rests on her shoulders, and she never lets it fall. You leave the sun-drenched fields behind your clothes, still dusted with flour and lentil husks, and step into a different kind of world, one that hums with rhythm, not wind, that smells not of earth, but of clay, wet, warm, and filled with potential. The walls here are made of packed mud. The air is thick with heat and powdered pigment. A narrow window lets in a slant of late afternoon sun, slicing across shelves, stacked high with bowls, jugs, and unfinished shapes wrapped in damp cloth. Welcome to the pottery workshop and to the women who shape beauty from mud. This place isn't grand. It's not decorated with lion hunt murals or guarded by eunuchs, but it is sacred in its own way, and today its rhythm is led by Layla, a craftswoman, born to a long line of ceramicists whose fingers speak more fluently in glaze than in words. She sits at a low wheel, turning a lump of clay that begins to rise like dough under her palms. Around her, a handful of women work in near silence. One paints a row of bowls with cobalt swirls. Another etches the outline of a lion into the curve of a jar. They don't talk much, but then they don't have to. The clay speaks for them. Layla's pot begins to take shape. A wide base, then a long tapering neck. Her fingers dip into a bowl of water and glide over the spinning form with such delicacy it's like watching someone coax breath into a sleeping thing. Her hair is wrapped in a scarf to keep out dust, and her arms are dusted with the creamy white residue that builds up when working with clay all day. She doesn't notice it or care. In the Achaemenid Empire, women artisans like Layla were not rare, but they were rarely recorded. Pottery was often seen as a man's trade in official documents. Yet behind the market stalls, behind the palace kitchens, behind the temple altars, it was often women's hands that shaped the jugs, the platters, the ceremonial vessels used every single day. Layla leans back, inspects her jar, and lifts it off the wheel with a satisfied nod. She places it gently onto a board, beside two others similar, but not the same. No mold, no template. Every piece carries her fingerprints, her breath, her name, even if she never signs it. Well, not exactly. Some female artisans carved tiny hidden symbols into their work, beneath the base tucked into a painted swirl inside a handle's curve. A leaf, a fish, a crescent moon, not for pay, not for praise, but for permanence. If a piece ended up in a palace or a temple or buried in the desert for archaeologists to find centuries later, that hidden mark said I was here. Historians still debate how intentional these marks were. But Layla. She always presses a curled vine into her jars just behind the base where only she knows to look. The workshop buzzes quietly. A kiln at the far end breathes heat into the room, its fire fed by bundles of tamarisk wood. The scent is sharp, dry, and oddly sweet. Layla checks the temperature with a practiced hand. Not a thermometer, but the feel of air on her wrist, the sound of the flame. It's an art and a gamble. Too hot and the glaze bubbles. Too cool and the pot shatters in silence. A younger woman beside her, maybe her niece, hums a song while shaping a bowl. She gets distracted for a second and squashes the rim. She curses softly. Layla leans over, wipes the girl's hands, and says something so dry, it makes everyone laugh. You can't catch the words, but the meaning is clear. Start over. Everyone wrecks a bowl sometimes. You imagine trying this yourself. You'd probably overwater the clay drop the half-formed jar and somehow splash blue glaze on the ceiling. The others would be kind, but you'd become a workshop legend. Remember that one visitor who made a bowl look like a squashed onion? They'd laugh about you for weeks, maybe months. You'd deserve it. But Layla. She makes it look effortless. She moves on to glazing now, selecting pigments from shallow dishes, mixing them with vinegar, brushing them onto the surface of another finished pot. The design takes shape slowly, two lions facing each other, separated by a cypress tree. Traditional, beautiful, bold. She doesn't trace the lines, she doesn't hesitate. Her hands know where to go. These pots won't stay here. Some will end up in markets sold to merchants and cooks. Others will be commissioned for noble houses. A lucky few will be packed in straw and sent west, perhaps to Sardis, maybe even as far as Egypt, where they'll hold wine or oil or salt and be admired by people who'll never know who shaped them. And yet each one carries her. You recall Nazarene, the farmer's wife whose bread fed families. Zeba, the healer who knew which leaf to crush and when. Vera, the priestess who kept the sacred flame alive. And now Layla, quiet, dusty, unnoticed. But without her, no one eats. No one prays. No one stores the offerings brought to the gods. Her niece finishes another bowl. This one works. Layla inspects it, nods once, and places it carefully on the rack. Another young girl passes by with a tray of watered wine. Layla takes a sip, her fingers still stained with cobalt. She doesn't thank the girl with words, just a quick squeeze of the hand. It's enough. The kiln groans as it's opened. Inside, red-hot pottery glows like suns waiting to cool. A wave of heat surges through the room. Everyone stops for a moment, eyes fixed on the light. It's beautiful and a little terrifying how fire can either finish your creation or destroy it with no warning. Kind of like life. The pots are drawn out with long hooks placed gently onto stone slabs to cool. Cracks, bubbles, color bursts, all are possible. Layla watches closely, heart in her throat, though she'd never say it. One pot, an amphora painted with blue fish, comes out perfect. Another meant for the merchant's cousin isn't. The glaze slipped. The handle cracked. She doesn't curse. She just sets it aside quietly, like burying a dream. That's the nature of this work, of all their work. creation, destruction, repetition, and always again. The sun dips lower. The workshop darkens. A final round of cleanup begins, scrubbing brushes, covering pigment jars, stacking unused clay. Layla stretches her back, wipes her hands on her apron, and presses her thumbprint into the base of the last jar of the day. You'll never see it. No one will. But it's there. Just like her. Night in Susa doesn't fall quietly. It folds itself into the city like a shawl drawn close, stitched with torch smoke and faraway drums' murmurs slipping between alleyways where market calls have long since faded and the air grows thick with secrecy. You move past sleeping stalls and shuttered doorways until you reach a narrow passage between two grain warehouses. There's no sign, no guards, just a heavy woolen curtain hanging limp in the stillness. You hesitate, then step through, and the world on the other side is small, dim, and dense with tension. The room is low-ceilinged and windowless, lit only by a single clay lamp, sputtering in the corner, casting long shadows across 5 women seated in a circle on woven mats, their faces half-lit, their eyes fully awake. This isn't a gathering for gossip or ceremony. It's strategy. Subversion, quiet rebellion. At the center sits Zora, a woman you wouldn't look at twice in daylight. She walks with a slight limp, wears coarse wool, and speaks so little in public that most people assume she's simple or shy. But here, surrounded by scribes, widows, spinners' market wives, and one woman whose fingers are still stained with dye from a workshop near the dye pits, she speaks like a general. And they listen. Tonight, they're planning a response to the new royal tax decree, a sudden hike in grain tithes that affects every household, noble and common alike, under the pretense of strengthening border defenses, though everyone knows the silver is going to a war no one supports. Zora doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't have to. Her presence does the work. She lifts a clay tablet recently brought from a neighbor who overheard the palace clerk. Grain inspectors will begin their circuit in 3 days, starting with the river wards. Zora draws a simple diagram in the dust with a broken reed grain, hidden under bundles of cut reeds in the storage pits, false measurements made with dry grain, sacks padded with clay children trained to answer nothing. If asked about stores, neighbors instructed to burn leftover scales and replace them with ones recalibrated to weigh light. One woman, older, cautious, the mother of a soldier, frowns. If they come inside, they'll find everything. And if one child speaks wrong, she doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't have to. Zora taps the floor with her knuckle. That's why we prepare them now. We don't wait until the boots hit the door. The others nod. There's no illusion here. They're not protected by noble husbands or temple favor. They are exposed. But they are also many, and that for now is power. Here's a quirky historical detail. Some women in ancient Persian cities were known to use knotted cords to pass information, a single length of dyed thread tied with knots at regular intervals. Each knot a symbol, safe, danger meet. Wait now. Hidden inside sleeves or wound around bangles, these cords were a kind of living message passed between hands that couldn't write or speak freely. Historians still debate whether this was a codified system or just a clever adaptation in tight communities. But tonight you watch as one woman finishes retying hers, fingers moving quickly, muscle memory guiding each twist. She slips the thread into her waistband. Nothing more needs to be said. Later that thread will tell someone else everything they need to know. They speak of diversion tactics, sending word to a nearby village that their stores are being targeted, encouraging them to stage a loud protest, while Zora's group redirects inspectors to storage areas already stripped and made to look pillaged. One woman knows a guard in the palace who drinks too much and owes her family a favor. Another volunteers her cousin's goat cart to transport decoy grain under bundles of firewood. Someone else suggests dressing their youngest daughters in temple white to evoke sympathy. It's clever. It's risky. It's all they have. You try to imagine yourself in their place, you'd probably tie the cord, wrong-hand it to the wrong person, and lead a tax inspector straight into a hidden cellar full of barley and bad decisions. You'd make a good cautionary tale. But Zora, she never flinches. She balances every option like weights on a scale. She's not just reacting, she's orchestrating. The room smells of smoke and stress. Someone offers dried apricots. No one takes any. Hunger is not the kind that food can touch tonight. One of the younger women, barely 20, eyes too bright, asks what happens if they're caught. Zora doesn't answer right away. She lets the silence stretch until it becomes its own warning. Then finally she says, "Then the grain rots in palace stores while the people starve." That's the choice. Resistance or slow death. There's no drama in her voice, just truth. A servant's footstep outside makes everyone freeze. The lamp flickers, but no one speaks. After a long moment, the sound fades. The woman nearest the curtain peeks through a crack and nods. Just a passerby. Still, the air stays tight for another breath. Just long enough for everyone to remember what's at stake. As the meeting winds down, Zora assigns tasks with simple hand gestures. 3 will meet again tomorrow to distribute grain rations. 2 will visit the market before dawn and begin whispering about spoiled harvests and sick goats. 1 will forge a note in a clerk's hand stating that inspection dates have changed. The woman with the dye-stained fingers will make the ink. No one protests. No one hesitates. And here's what's so quietly magnificent: none of these women are nobility. They don't hold land. They won't be mentioned in temple hymns or etched into gold plates. But their actions tonight will ripple through Susa's economy, through its rumor channels, even up to the palace. They won't stop the tax, but they'll bend it. Just enough to keep their families alive. Just enough to survive the season. You watch them leave one by one. They don't say goodbye. They don't make plans to celebrate. They wrap their veil, slip through the curtain, and melt into the night, their footsteps blending with the hush of an empire too vast to notice them, and too dependent on them to survive without them. Zora lingers last. She unties the cord from her waist and reties it slowly, this time each knot precise. She doesn't smile. She doesn't nod. She just looks at the extinguished lamp checks, the windowless dark one last time, and disappears. And as the room empties, you understand rebellion doesn't always look like fire and banners. Sometimes it's a knotted thread, a forged tablet, a child who knows to stay quiet. Sometimes it's 5 women in the dark daring to shift the weight of an empire with nothing but their hands. Dawn does not come with fanfare. It arrives in the quietest possible way, just a thinning of the shadows, a softening of the torchlight, the barest gold dust slipping in through the high slats of a royal audience hall. You blink and realize the stars are fading. The city stirs. The empire once sleeping draws its breath again. And so does she. The queen, not the queen from the old stories, not merely the wife of a king, not a jeweled ornament beside a throne. This queen, let's call her a mistress, is seated now in a hall carved of white stone and lined with lotus-patterned columns. The torchlight has been replaced by sunshafts. There are no poets, no musicians, just the sound of styluses, scratching of seals being pressed into clay of politics, sharpening its teeth before breakfast. She sits alone, on a low throne, her robe dark and unadorned, her fingers bare except for a single ring, a band of silver etched with 3 rising stars. Her face calm, her gaze alert. Around her envoys arrive, one by one, from Media, from Lydia, from Elam. They bow low, present their tributes, their grievances, their carefully wrapped demands. Amestris listens. She does not speak quickly. She does not rush her gestures. She asks questions, not many, not loudly, but the kind that expose cracks in even the most polished speech. A young envoy begins to fumble. She tilts her head, waits. The silence deepens. He adjusts his robe. She says nothing. He admits an error in translation. She smiles just barely and moves on. Here, queens do not rule by decree. They rule by presence. Their power is not in volume, but in gravity. A pull that draws people in, holds them accountable, and reshapes alliances without ever drawing a blade. To her right, a scribe hands her a clay tablet. She reads it. A proposed grain deal. She glances up at the envoy from Bactria who brought it. "You offered 30 carts last moon," she says. "Now!" 22. The envoy coughs begin a muddled excuse about floods and transport failures. Amestris raises one hand, not a threat, just a pause. "We'll take 15, she says. "But your nephew's land grant will wait. It's not punishment. It's leverage, and it lands." This is diplomacy Persian style. Not thunder, not fireworks, but water against stone, steady reshaping, enduring. Some historians argue that queens like Amestris were ceremonial figures allowed to host to mother, but rarely to lead. Others point to tablets like this, one legal documents signed, sealed, and dispatched under her own authority. Watching her now, you understand the truth is somewhere in between. She may not command armies, but she commands outcomes. It said some queens gifted visiting envoys with silver cups etched with secret symbols, an eye, a branch, a coil of flame. Each was a message, a reminder, a warning. To misplace such a cup was not only a diplomatic offense, it was an invitation to be forgotten. Whether the practice was widespread or just clever myth-making, no one knows. But today, as Amestris gestures for the gift trays to be brought out, you spot them, delicate cups, each wrapped in linen, each glinting like a small moon. The envoys bow deeper. She rises only once, to walk the length of the hall and study a map unfurled on a low table, a relief carving of provinces etched into red stone. She leans over it, traces a line with her finger. A border dispute, a cattle route, a river that's recently changed course. She listens to her advisors, then murmurs a name. The scribe records it. It's done. A governor will be replaced, not with a sword, with a whisper. You try to imagine yourself in her place. You'd probably forget the envoy's name, knock over a silver cup, and grant grain to the wrong province. By mid-morning, there would be a minor rebellion and a strongly worded clay tablet carved entirely in sarcasm. But Amestris, she closes her hands over each detail as if she's stitching them into a larger tapestry no one else can see. By midday, the hall begins to empty. The couriers rush to deliver sealed messages. The envoys retreat to corners of the palace to whisper what they've learned and what they haven't. Amestris remains seated, turning one last tablet in her hand. It's nothing special. Just a note from her steward about a noblewoman named Anahita and a banquet that went unusually quiet after a particular compliment. Amestris smiles. A faint, thoughtful smile. She's learning, she thinks. And she's right. Outside, the city roars back to life. Markets swell. Children race through alleys. Pigeons scatter from rooftops. But in here, the air stays still. The queen finally rises. Her robe shifts like ink poured over stone. The ring glints once in the sunlight. She passes under the great lintel of the hall, its carvings whispering stories of kings and gods and the women who outlived them all. And as you follow her, you realize something you hadn't before. You've seen farmers like Nazarene whose sweat feeds the nation, potters like Layla whose hands shape its stories, priestesses like Vera whose flame holds its soul together. You've seen rebels, healers, traders, spies. And here at the center of the empire sits a woman whose power lies not in breaking rules, but in knowing every rule and bending it with a glance. Her presence ties it all together. The fire, the grain, the silk, the ink. She is the echo behind every whisper, the shadow behind every decree. And when she disappears behind the golden curtain, it is not the end. It is the beginning of something else entirely. And now, as the last of the lamps flicker low and the firelight softens into dreams, we leave behind the empire of ancient Persia, an empire not just of kings and battles, but of women whose lives pulsed beneath the stone and silk of history. You've walked through perfumed courtyards and tense banquet halls. You've followed noblewomen into shrines, artisans into workshops, midwives into sacred birthing chambers, and healers into rooms filled with fevered breath and hope. You've watched a farmer's wife trade bread for figs, a merchant's widow, plot resistance in the dark, and a queen speak with silence sharper than any sword. Every one of them carved her shape into the empire, sometimes loud, often quietly, always enduring. These women did not wait to be remembered. They wove their legacies into pots, prayer silk seams, and whispered alliances. Their names may not fill royal scrolls, but their labor, their wisdom, and their defiance hold the foundations of an empire still admired millennia later. And now you return from that world not as a tourist, but as someone who has listened, someone who knows that strength isn't always loud, that power often walks in silence, that resistance sometimes begins with a thread tied carefully beneath a sleeve. Let the rustle of silk fade. Let the scent of rosewater and cedar drift away. Let their voices wrap around you not as stories from the past, but as lullabies for the present. Close your eyes. Breathe deep. You've heard their secrets. Now carry them into your sleep.